Intuition is the voice of the non-physical world.
Some people call it gut instinct. Other people say it is the wisdom of the soul.
Intuition is imagination. Intuition is the creative spirit, the creative imagination.
I try to think of intuition as including all of these. It's how the mind touches the universe.
Interesting. But when is it intuition, and when is it just a game of chance?
Intuition is the voice of the non-physical world. In other words, it's not possible to understand intuition without coming to grips with the existence of non-physical reality.
Just gut feeling. Nothing that logic can answer. It's just a feeling that you have.
My definition of intuition is probably when you see a set of events or circumstances and you are able to determine what their outcome will be before you actually see the outcome.
I think of intuition as an umbrella term that includes ESP. That ESP, telepathy, clairvoyance, precognition, those are subcategories to me of intuition. And reading another person's soul or their spirit or getting a creative inspiration or other subcategories, even subliminal computation could be a subcategory of intuition. It's a very large field, and in a sense it's not at all controversial. Everybody acknowledges that there is intuition, but almost everybody has a different idea as to what intuition is.
I was a little girl. I was afraid of it at first. I didn't know what was going on. And then after a while, you learn not to fear that. I'd see things in my dreams that would frighten me or I didn't understand.
For many people, the intuitive doorway is opened through the dream state. And if you think of the everyday world and all the noise and activity that's going on, we often don't hear what the inner mind has to say. And in the quiet of the night, when we're very, very still, our intuitive mind is speaking to us in the form of dreams. And dreams that come true are called precognitive. And they're sent to show us an upcoming event.
Freud said that dreams are the royal road to the unconscious, and surely our intuitions come from our unconscious. You know, Freud also said many other interesting things. He said that we, in our civilized life, in our modern Western civilization in particular, we have certain aspects that are natural and normal to us that we repress, that we don't let into our consciousness. And he thought particularly our sexual drives, our aggressive drives. And then Jung went a step further and he said, yes, but also our mystical, our spiritual, our intuitive side, we repress that as well.
It's something I listen to. Intuition, I think it's the inner voice or the higher self. If I don't pay attention to it, I see things through dreams. I use my intuition in my dreams. And if I don't listen to it, I will have nightmares. They will come back, recurring dreams. So I pay attention to them, I listen to them. So that's how I deal with my intuition.
With me, it's more, it's not just as much my dreams. I don't know how to put this. I can know things about people. Not bad things. I mean, I'm not gonna know anything that they don't want me to know. I was working on a cancer floor for a year, and I was always the first one in the room whenever someone was about to die because they didn't have a color around them, or you could just get this feeling and this inner voice, and it would be like this person's about to leave, or they wouldn't be there at all, and yet their body was still in this some type of function mode. But whenever they were about to go up to heaven, I was always the first one in there, and I would just be kind of standing inside the background waiting for this code to be called or to fix them up or whatever. It was interesting.
I like to look at it more in terms of the dimensions of the intuitive experience, and being that kind of thing where it's something that you know, but you don't know why you know. You can't explain where the information came from. It's that non-rational way of knowing that contrasts so sharply with our rational, fact-based kinds of knowing.
I was going to college one day in Atlanta, Georgia, and I saw the Blue Angels fly, and I said, that's what I want to do. So I'm back home to Miami, and took a 2-year course in aviation and career pilot program. And magically, I was the right place, the right time. I was hired at Weston Airlines when I was 21 years old. And that began my family of Eastern Airlines.
It was odd because he was the most unlikely person, I think, to be a pilot, because he was so much into music.
Some people would say, oh, your mind is a computer and it's subliminally computing things. That's the conventional artificial intelligence or cognitive science view of intuition. Other people would say it's the deep wisdom of the soul coming through. And frankly, I lean in that direction.
Leaving a friend's house to go home, and I just had a feeling that said, you don't need to go. And I didn't know why, and that was it. Like I said, a few years ago, and I really didn't trust it, and I just said, oh, I'm just thinking that myself, which I still think sometimes, but on my way back, I was in a car accident, and yeah, in fact, I had another one. But even in that too, it's almost like I heard a little voice before saying, you're going to be okay, and then I'll go, what? And then before I know it, you know, someone hit me.
I had a dream one evening, quite unexpectedly, about a great uncle of mine, my great uncle Harry, who I hadn't seen in over 10 years or more. Hadn't thought about Uncle Harry at all since I was a child, but I was a college student, and Uncle Harry came to me in the dream, and he began speaking to me in symbolism, using the Chinese yin-yang, which was funny because he was an old Jewish man, the head of the Orthodox Jewish synagogue in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. And then something touched me very deeply. It was as if Uncle Harry was there speaking to me really about my life. And I woke up from the dream and I was crying. I'd never done that before. And singing at the same time. I was crying and singing an old Jewish melody. I felt so touched by him. And so I wrote home and I said, how's Uncle Harry? I had a dream about him. And 3 days later, when my mother got the letter, she called me up immediately and she said, how did you know? Uncle Harry just died. And, you know, the whole family was stunned that I would have had a dream like that and mentioned him. And so that began me. That was that experience that pushed me into the search. I needed to find out the meaning of experiences like this. And I subsequently learned a lot of things, and not only about my Uncle Harry, but about that whole realm of experience.
For centuries, intuition has been recognized as a natural mental faculty, a key element in discovery, a forecaster, or a revealer of truth.
One of the most intuitive things that I read are from antiquity is the Tao Te Ching or any of the other Chinese classics, because I have found them to be very intuitive ways of looking at the world. For example, Taoism to me is the intuitive way. So that's 2,500 years back in our written recorded history.
The fact of the matter is that every culture has its own unique paths into intuition, and probably the least intuitive of all cultures is the modern, scientifically oriented American culture. We pride ourselves on being modern rationalists, for the most part, although frankly, demographic surveys show that that's even breaking down now. But if you go to Europe or to Asia or to South America or Africa, there's ancient cultures there where all of the people are constantly reminded of a time in the history of their culture when rationality was not dominant, when intuition in many of its modes was the dominant cultural form. We don't have that so much in America because our country was founded in the age of enlightenment, in the age of rationality. But even then, if you look at the dollar bill, let's say the reverse of the Great Seal, the eye in the triangle image, you can see that the founders, the very forefathers of our country, were involved in Freemasonry and the Rosicrucian movement, and they had their own intuitive traditions. So they put the all-seeing eye, the eye in the triangle, in the dollar bill.
I think that intuition has probably gotten a bad rap in business. I think that people think that it's something that either is used by a small group of people or something for your personal life. If people understood how important a function it is in business, I think they would use it more. All they have to do is be more in tune, be more sensitive.
In the business world, what they do is they want to reduce it to a rational process. And I think by reducing it to a rational process, we destroy it.
Dr. Albert Einstein says, no problem is solved by the same consciousness that created it.
We all know that Einstein spoke of mysticism and he spoke of intuition, and when you read his biography, what you learn is that his theory of relativity came to him in a flash, in a moment, and then he spent the next 10 years working out the details. And that's the way great creative breakthroughs are made. That's the way they come through. Intuition works instantly. Then you have to do your homework to back it up, to support it. But it suggests that if we understood the depths of the human mind, we would realize that it is far more powerful, far more comprehensive and wide-reaching than we normally give it credit for being, than we normally give ourselves credit for being. You know, the journey into the self, ultimately, is, I would say, it's the journey into God.
Intuition inspired brilliant symphonies by Mozart and Beethoven. It sparked bold inventions, such as Thomas Edison's light bulb and the phonograph. It was an ingredient of genius for Henry Ford. In 1908, he achieved great success with his Model T, becoming America's first millionaire.
There isn't a great leader around who wasn't a highly intuitive person, frankly. Even some of those who were the great evil geniuses of history were highly intuitive. It goes with the territory. If you're going to accomplish something, your intuition will be involved.
Intuitive also means sensitive. It means aware of things, tuned into things. And I think the more people that are in tune to what's happening, are they going to be better people, are going to be better executives, are going to lead better. That's what I'm looking for. I can find an employee to do an honest day's work for an honest day's pay. I need leaders. I need exceptional people.
Psychologist Carl Jung found people confident in using their intuition tend to have superior leadership abilities. They have a sense of vision, of know-how, to effectively move toward that vision.
Jung had a lot to say about intuition. He's really one of the great geniuses of the 20th century, and he talked about the notion of the collective unconscious, that in our unconscious mind, in our dreaming mind, we share this with all of humanity. And in a sense, the deep wisdom, the mythological wisdom of all of humanity is found in our dreams. He also talked about the concept of synchronicity, which is becoming a very popular principle these days. And synchronicity, or meaningful events that occur that are not related by any normal causal connection, but are guided, you might say, by some sort of spirit, flow of the universe itself, that this is the way intuition expresses itself. It's the expression of our psyche, which is really the Greek word for our soul.
For Carl Jung, intuition is one of the modes of knowing. For him, it was sensing versus intuition. Sensing is learning about your world from outside. And for him, the intuitive way of knowing is knowing about the world from inside. So it's the difference between external knowing and internal knowing.
Jung was a deep student of spiritualism as well. When you look at Jungian psychology, it's sort of a mainstream psychology today, but its roots are much you might say this: Jung had one foot just as firmly planted in the mystical, spiritual tradition of humanity as he did in the scientific tradition. So he's a great resource for people in the field of psychiatry and psychology who want to understand intuition.
From Hollywood to the corporate boardroom, what many business executives use in decision-making is the kind of innovative ideas or approaches that come straight from intuition. Two professors from Newark College of Engineering interviewed corporate presidents and CEOs. They discovered a significant correlation between the precognitive abilities of company presidents and the profits of those companies. Intuitive leadership is profit leadership.
There was a recent international study that was done of 9 countries, about 1,300 executives, very senior level executives, and one of the questions that they asked them is, to what extent do you use your rational way of being, your intuitive way of being, or use them both equally? And 60% of the executives in that survey said that it was equally or intuitive was their preference, and only 40% rational in terms of their just daily use of intuition.
My strongest area of intuition is right here in the workplace. I use it for hiring employees, for promotion of employees, disciplinary actions, negotiations, but mainly I use it all in business.
Worldwide, we find that senior level executives give great credence to the role and importance of intuition in what they do every day.
A lot of times, logic might say to me that this isn't the way to do it, or that you need to go through steps A, B, and C before making a decision. But I have to make decisions in the shortest amount of time possible. And I can't go through those steps. A lot of times, if I do go through those steps, it always proves out that my intuition was right in the first place. So I generally don't go through the steps.
It never happens as a result of a long process of looking at facts and figures and trying to put them together that way. It always happens as a side event in that process. I might do the research for a particular decision, and then at the end of that research period, put the project away. And maybe an hour, 2 hours, a month, 2 weeks later, depends upon what the situation is, the intuitive response to that might happen. If I make the decision immediately upon finishing the research, I don't think the intuition part of it takes effect. I think there needs to be some processing time.
I think it's important to balance intuition with the factual, logical side of the mind. That's one of the reasons that we support and are engaged in research. And you may be able to tell them, well, I don't have any data to support what I'm telling you directly. It's an intuition. But I can tell you there's lots of background data that shows that intuition is very effective in decision making. There's data that shows that people can obtain information even though they don't have sensory clues or logical clues as to what that information is.
I maybe have that feeling, but then I back it up with facts and figures to try to indicate that there's that there's some basis to it. And if there's not enough substance as far as facts and figures available, I just have to say, hey guys, this is my gut feeling on it, and we really need to do this. And my judgment has been good in the past on this sort of thing, so let's do it that way today.
As people are becoming aware of the glory of intuition, I like to call it the power of intuition, the power hunches, that you could use your intuition to get to the bottom line very, very quickly. You could get to the variety of parameters quickly. Intuition is assuming a very respectable place.
In a 60-minute interview, you can't tell if these people are going to fit in. There is nothing that I can go through, a process that I can go through to determine the perfect employee if I go through the logical steps. I have to trust my instincts. And in 60 minutes, I can come up with a good employee.
The people at the top of the company, who we call the head honchos, are really the head honchos. And they seem to have the liberty. They also have the responsibility to make the decisions at their disposal. And I have interviewed 160 people, top CEOs around the country. And I have found those who are really, successful and confident have also empowered their staff and their managers to make decisions as well.
I definitely encourage our upper managers to use intuition here. They will come to me with a problem, and I don't even solve the problems anymore. They still come. I don't know why, because I always say, what would you do? What would you do? And through that process, they learn to trust themselves, and they learn to lean on their own beliefs. And it's a growing experience for them, and it also decentralizes a company. You can't have all the power located in one office. Your company can't operate that way. So when they are empowered, and when they believe that what they do is right and the decision that I would make, then we've got a much better company. We've got 10 decision makers, not one. And that's how I like to run it.
Yes, they're open to encouraging us to use our intuitive decision-making process and that sort of thing in a very informal way. I think it's just the way this company has been built, why a lot of it was by following people's intuitive feelings about the marketplace and things like that.
Intuition is more than good luck and good profits. Intuition can be a matter of life and death. Over 20 years ago, a young chemist was testing a new fertility drug for the Food and Drug Administration. The drug had already gone through a battery of tests, passing each one with flying colors. But this chemist felt something was wrong, something wasn't right. She shared her doubts with her supervisor, who told her, "Trust your instincts." She then rejected the drug and sent it back to the pharmaceutical company. Less than 9 months later, the researchers' doubts came to fruition. The drug she had been testing was thalidomide, a fertility drug that was later found to cause birth defects. The women who took thalidomide in other countries did find that the drug helped them to conceive, but in most cases, they gave birth to grossly deformed babies without arms or legs. This researcher should be commended for going against logic, going against the facts. If she had not trusted her intuition, thousands more women could have ingested thalidomide and given birth to deformed babies. Nobody knows for sure just how intuition works, but many people think they know where it works, in the right hemisphere of the brain. What's particularly interesting is the frontal lobe region of the brain. It straddles the two hemispheres and contributes significantly to intuition, particularly the function of predicting.
For me, the brain is it's the mechanism through which the mind is experienced. And for me, both our rational way of knowing and our intuitive way are a part of mind, not of brain. Brain is just like it's the body with which it expresses itself.
I know that there are many different theories about intuition in the brain, and I have to say at this stage they have to be at the level of hypotheses. None of these theories has yet been demonstrated, but some of the theories would be that when you're in an alpha state, when your mind is giving out brainwave signals in the 7 to 10 cycles a second range, that's more optimal for intuition. Other people would say, yes, the corpus callosum, which is the part of the brain that unites the two hemispheres, when you're centered, when your consciousness is kind of balanced between your right hemisphere and your left hemisphere, that's optimal for intuition.
Well, there is the research that you've probably read about that shows that women have, a more richly connected left hemisphere and right hemisphere through the corpus callosum. And it may be that this ability for the two hemispheres to be more richly interconnected may in fact sort of facilitate the intuitive experience.
I don't really think there's a gender difference in intuition. I think males and females are equally intuitive, but there are social differences.
Culturally, women have more permission, at least in our culture, to be intuitive than men do. Because I feel that I have as much potential to be intuitive as you do as a woman, but culture has given you more permission than it's given me.
There are many other suggestions, but I don't think we yet have a definitive answer about the relationship between intuition and the brain, except to say that from my point of view, I would say that intuition is larger than the brain itself. There are those who say that intuition comes out of the brain, that consciousness comes out of the brain, just as you might say breathing comes out of the lungs. I would say it's a little different. There's another view, and I think we have to take it seriously, which is that the brain emerges from consciousness. The consciousness is larger than the brain.
Okay, you've sparked my curiosity. Who is intuitive?
Everybody is intuitive. I absolutely insist that everybody is intuitive by virtue of being alive, by virtue of being a human being, by having a brain, by being a conscious entity. Consciousness itself is intuition.
My personal belief is that everyone is naturally intuitive, that the difference between you and I or anyone else and how well we do with their intuition is how much has been covered up and hidden under our rational, chattering mind. But I believe that everyone is naturally intuitive, that we're born that way.
Dr. Jonas Salk used to say, "I wonder what my intuition will toss up to me, like a gift from the sea."
Since children don't acquire the capacity for formal reasoning for some time, many profound thinkers, such as biologist philosopher Lyle Watson, believe that children are more intuitive than adults.
Yes, and intuition hasn't been drummed out of them the way our culture does to many adults. And there's a certain amount of research in the field of psychic research that suggests that young children about the age of 4 score very highly. And then the older they get, each year after that, their scores will drop on tests of extrasensory perception until about the age of 11, when their score is as good or bad as the average adult. I don't know for sure how much to trust that research, but the folklore is just enormous to suggest that children are closer to the realm of spirit from which they emerged, and just as very old people are as they prepare for death, and that those of us who are in the middle phases of life often get locked into this 5-sensory, rationalist, materialist worldview that leaves very, very little room for intuition.
The ability to be intuitive is infinite. Everybody has this potential. It's like saying everybody could sing. Some of us sing better than others, but we could all learn to sound those vocal cords. The same way with intuition.
I think you could consider intuition to be similar to athletic ability or intellectual ability or artistic ability, that some people are born with more of it than others, and almost everybody can improve their skill by paying attention to it and cultivating it.
You are naturally intuitive. So it's not something that you have to learn. It's not a skill to train. What it really is, it's a natural talent that you already have that you need to nurture so that you can rediscover, reacquaint yourself with it, and learn to make it a part of your everyday life.
Underlying every premise is an intuitive postulate. So even then you can't avoid intuition. And in my opinion, the truth is we use intuition every second of every day of our lives. I'm using intuition now to speak to you. I don't even think logically what word is going to come out of my mouth next, and you use intuition to hear those words, even though I'm speaking very, very quickly, and there's not even a pause between some of the words. In your brain, you can tell that there's a sentence, that there's meaning. It's almost as if we're communicating telepathically, and the words are just like pointers to something deeper than the words themselves.
How do you know you're being intuitive?
Intuition, by its definition, is knowing without knowing how you know. If you knew how it was you know, then it's probably not intuition.
I have a real strong feeling. It's usually the same. I have a real strong feeling, and it's kind of like a sensation in my upper body. It's like, wow, you just know.
When I get an intuitive feeling, why I get a visualization of it and a sort of a tingle up my spine that indicates to me that there's something. It's like a deja vu kind of feeling.
I either see it literally or I see it in symbols. You know? But after many years of experience, I know what's going to happen.
It has to do with the difference between apprehension and comprehension. Logically, we comprehend things, but with intuition, we apprehend things. It's like when you hold your hand up and catch a ball in your hand. You catch it, and then you feel it. There's a kind of a sensation that like you've caught it.
A lot of things happen. Oh, I'm thinking of my mother, and the phone rings. Oh, Mom, I was just thinking of you. And then a day later, we're thinking of a friend, Sally. And the phone rings at Sally. Oh, Sally. And each time we say, what a coincidence. And it begins to happen 2 times and 3 times and 4 times. And finally, we realize this isn't a coincidence. Something must be happening that I'm keying into someone. So we start having experiences that we can't explain in ordinary terms.
My experience has been is that most people don't know they're having intuitive experiences, but my belief is that we are all having intuitive experiences all the time. But because of all of the different kinds of noises that chatter up the way, is that we very rarely hear our intuitions because we're seldom quiet enough mentally to actually hear that still small voice within, as it's sometimes referred to, coming through.
I didn't know. I didn't know. I acted a lot on what I felt, and I figured out later, only later, that it had to be intuition. To me, it was a developed sense. For a lot of years, it lay dormant, but for about 10 years ago, I just started using it.
In December of '88, I was in Miami, and I had my normal 6-month captain check, and it's very emotional. I finished the check just fine, and halfway out through the gate, the Miami Eastern Terminal, facility. I stopped and just looked around and smelt the kerosene, the jet fuel, thought of the memories, and I said, "So long, Eastern, I love you." Because I knew that was my last check ride with Eastern Airlines. Very strong intuitive feelings, a knowing, flash of insight, whichever terminology is appropriate. But there's no question in my mind and my heart that was my last check ride with Eastern Airlines. So it's very emotional, very intense, to be sure.
They can come as a sensation in the body. It can come as an emotion, even though we have to be very careful there about the fears and desires. It can come as a thought, like I hear a phrase or words in my mind, or it can come as a visual image. In other words, I see a picture in my mind that is an intuitive flash.
Well, I don't think there are any boundaries to intuition in time or in space, or you might even say within the soul there is no boundary. And certainly in the field of psychic research, which is one of my areas of specialty, there's a large body of data, hundreds of experiments in what we call precognition. I've engaged in them often and have come up with very clear-cut data that show that if I want to direct my attention to a future activity, something that has not yet occurred, in which nobody alive today knows for certain what will happen, that I can get images and pictures of that event with a far greater degree of consistency, accuracy, reliability than one would expect by chance. So you could say, statistically speaking, we are caught in a flow of information from the future just as much as we have memory from the past.
I would dream, like 2 years before Eastern shut down, I would see this airplane just slowly going down like a shadow, and like right before Eastern shut its doors, I saw the logo. I didn't understand what it meant, but it crashed right out behind our house, and it said Eastern Airlines on the side of the plane. I said, "Daddy, the plane's going down." I said, "Eastern's going down." And this was well before Eastern Airlines ever shut its doors.
If a person dreams, let's say, of an accident, a plane crash, and right away they become very nervous, oh, am I going to be in a plane crash? So I said, well, let's go back and look at the dream. You know, sometimes a crash could be metaphoric. It could be telling you something's going to crash in your life. You're going at too fast a pace.
In my experience, sometimes these intuitive messages come in very literal form, and other times they come symbolically. So we have to kind of look behind the symbolism and see what is the message that's behind the apparent symbol or thing that I've seen or think I know.
It was a warning, and I get a lot in warnings that something's going to happen, but still it didn't prepare me for seeing my dad not in his uniform anymore.
We use intuition as a blanket word, but it covers undoubtedly dozens and dozens of different levels of functioning and subtleties of mental functioning. At one level, we're using it all the time anyway, but at other levels, we can open it up, and all it really takes, in my estimation, is an act of attention.
I am in tune at work. My mind's here, my body's here. I physically know what I'm doing here. I'm aware of things more. At home, it's a lot more lax atmosphere, and I don't have to be as in tune. So I do believe that sensitivity has a lot to do with intuition. I think that the signs are always there. It's just, can you pick up on them?
There is a concept called the intuitive personality that was developed by Carl Jung, the great Swiss psychiatrist. And he really had 4 basic personality types: the thinking type, the feeling type, the sensation type, and the intuitive type. You could think of them, if you were to think of them in terms of animals, you've got the owl, the lion, the dolphin, and the eagle. And of course the intuitive type is the dolphin.
The intuitive personality is a personality that has an openness to it. It's a personality that is able to be quiet in the presence of experience. It's that kind of personality that's able to focus on the present moment. It's someone who can be here now, in a word.
There are many keys to open the intuitive doorway. The first key is to honor. You have to honor your intuition. You have to believe in it, honor it, and use it. The second key is brief and simple. Intuitive mind speaks to us very briefly, succinctly, in a word or two. We go into the next key, picture symbol, or image. That's how the intuitive mind speaks to us metaphorically. If I say to you, for example, how do you feel? The intuitive mind would answer this briefly and succinctly and pictorially. For example, like sunshine. If I go on to give you a paragraph or two about how I feel, that's not the intuitive mind. So we get the picture, image, or symbol, and then another key is that we have to associate. What does that mean?
Let me give you an example. Based on this image, a woman named Victoria Weston made a prediction in 1990 that the United States and Russia would create a flag. As time passed, the visual image would accurately reveal the end of communism and the rebirth of a Russia as an independent country.
Another key is first impressions. Your first impressions are always correct.
The students in our class, they keep what we call the intuitive experience journal, and they do that, and they make sure that they identify each of the different dimensions of each intuitive experience. So what it requires them to do is to look carefully and thoroughly at each intuitive experience that they have. And over time, as they do that, it deepens their awareness about what do I really mean by intuition, or what is intuition for me? Because I find that each individual has their own intuitive profile. In other words, no two people are exactly intuitive in the same way. So through this process of journaling and carefully studying your own intuitive experiences, you come to know your intuitive way.
But I do find that there's a time of day. In the mornings, I'm more intuitive than I am in the afternoons. I'm more in touch with things in the mornings.
I read affirmations every morning and every evening, and that helps me quiet my mind, because if I don't, I will not dream. So I don't know which I'll do. I pray a lot, so that helps.
Prayer helps.
To quiet your mind, listen to that inner voice.
Music helps.
Books.
Meditation is one of the most important things I could access in my intuitive toolbox. And what does meditation mean? Still. Stillness, quiet time, introspection. And people think you just have to sit in a fancy pose, like a pretzel, twisted up on a mountain. Well, that's a very abstract image of a meditator. A meditator to me means we're focusing, we're being very focused in quiet time. The person who goes out jogging, in essence, is meditating. They're focusing on what they're doing. The person who goes out walking is focusing on what they're doing. And what the meditation means simply is quieting, stilling the mind, relieving it of all unnecessary chatter and noise.
For most people, at least initially, their intuitions are spontaneous. In other words, they just come up, they happen. Now, once you get reacquainted with your intuition and know what it feels like for you, what are your cues, then given a problem situation, you can, in that thinking about that problem, just give yourself some quiet space and consciously call on your intuition to provide you with its insight on the problem to complement what you may have already found out rationally. So to consciously evoke your intuition.
You know, it seems we're all in such a hurry to get where we're going and to get to work and to leave work and to get home. I just think if they could just slow down, you know, go sit by a tree, go and just and slow down.
And not be afraid, because there's a lot of people out there that would go, oh, I would love to be able to see auras, or I would love to be able to have these gut feelings. And it's like, why? It's like, oh, so I could know what he is thinking about me, or know what that person is going to do. And I think the whole reasoning behind why you want to be intuitive is the key, because we have that to help others, and it's not to help ourselves solely. It's like, I'm going to see this in you because I can help you with this. So if you get the concrete basis of why you want this gift, then I truly believe that it will come to you.
We come to trust our intuition as we first come to recognize it, and then secondly, just start to notice it and pay attention to it and just begin to accept it. Learning to trust intuition takes time. We have to learn to experience it, we have to pay attention to it, and then slowly but surely make some mistakes, have failures, get in touch with why is it that that thing didn't work out the way I thought it would, and then gradually over time build up our trust, because trust is an important ingredient in having intuition work well for us.
Where I use my intuition is it's almost like a trust. I can just trust it now that I'm older. If it's going in for a job, or if it's, I was apartment hunting for a while. I went into many and many apartments, and I would go in, and then I went into one, and I just knew. I walked in the door, and I saw a Christmas tree I would have in December, and this was in May. But I said, this is where I'm gonna be staying. So I, without knowing, seeing a lease or knowing how much it cost, I turned and I said, I'm gonna be living here, and I am. To this day, I'm still there.
Well, I would just encourage people to trust their instincts and to trust their feelings. They tend to undervalue those feelings because you can't chart them and you can't graph them. But I think I would encourage people to go with what they feel. Keep an open mind. Look at everything like there's a possibility that something good might come out of it, and go for it.
When it comes to intuitive testing, I'm really a stickler. And it's interesting because my background in psychology, I've been trained as a psychometrist, as a tester. And I find it's very hard to give what we call paper and pencil tests, questions, objective tests and questions that test a person's intuition, because they may be intuitive in one situation and not in another. A person may be very intuitive, but at work, where they have to respond to the laws and the dictates and follow what their superior is saying, is not able to be as intuitive. So sometimes, you're intuitive in one situation, you're not intuitive in another. I like the type of tests that put you in a situation. For example, I send you to the Xerox room and the copier breaks down. How are you going to fix it? Now, I would watch the mode. There's the very logical mode that would do what? That logical person would go for the book. The other person, the more open or intuitive person, would kind of fix it, would kind of, fool around, go in, try to fix it in an exploratory way. So I like to put people into situational tests and see how they respond.
I think it's a nice strength within each other. Like I said earlier, you don't feel so alone if you're having these feelings and you go with that instinct. I think it's a nice strength we have with each other.
I was seeing this one guy, and I remember Heather coming up to me, and she was like, "Carrie, something's just not right. Please be careful, please be careful." And I was careful, and I could have really been hurt if I hadn't have heard that warning and actually sat there and said, "Hey, Heather told me to be careful, so I'm really going to."
Intuition is always accurate. Your ability to understand it or to receive it is not.
There are those who say that if it's not accurate, it wasn't a true intuition. That's kind of a metaphysical perspective. You can postulate that intuition is always accurate. On the other hand, in the real world, we're all human. Nobody is always accurate.
Now, for me, the interpretation, that's when these other parts of me come in and mess it up, something that I want out of this. So my need for something is going to distort the message. But the original, pure intuition, I too believe is accurate, always accurate. I think our intuition is always on the mark if we're able to get through all of the chaff to the core essence of that intuitive experience.
I believe it's more accurate than I like to give it credit for. When I have an intuitive feeling about something, I will follow it about 50% of the time. And every time I do follow it, it ends up being accurate. And when I don't, I end up saying, geez, I should have been more careful about following that intuitive feeling.
Your intuition is always correct. If it's not, one of the culprits gets in the way. Either wishful thinking, we see things, as we would like them to be. Fear is another deterrent that gets in the way of our intuition. Projection, we project onto other people what's true for ourselves. Our intuition also is not accurate when we're tired or fatigued or unusually stressed. So ruling out all those contingencies, our intuition has the capability to be correct 100% of the time.
What I have found in my work is that our emotions may get in the way of hearing our intuitive voice. So it's more likely to be the case that our emotional fears and our emotional desires in particular are going to cut off our intuition or mask it out, rather than it being an aid or a support for our intuition.
We have the higher emotions and we have the lower emotions. And people say, well, the intellect should rule the emotions, but by that they mean the lower emotions, greed and fear and jealousy. It's better to be, calm and intellectual than to be angry or jealous or fearful. On the other hand, the higher emotions, I think, should rule the intellect. And the higher emotions are yearning for wholeness, are yearning for beauty, for truth, for goodness in our lives. These things cannot be dominated by the intellect, but they have to lead and guide the intellect. And I think that the higher emotions are those which are most associated with intuition.
If you're using your intuition to try to determine lottery numbers to bet, that's probably going to contend, because see how easily already the desire element in a person has gotten contaminated there? So that using intuition for those kind of direct personal gains is likely to mess the intuition up in any event.
I do, and I don't win when I do that. And I haven't won when I don't do it either, so it's a 50-50 chance. I don't think my intuition helps me with that. I think that's more of a chance.
I tell people to find out, is this the real thing, or is a culprit intruding? Ask the question, or whatever you're concerned about, whatever decision you've made using your intuition, pose it to yourself. Go back into your body. How is your body feeling? How is your body responding? If you're getting a lot of comfortability in your body, you know it's intuition. The real thing is operating.
In my opinion, to the extent that you live your life optimally, you will enhance your intuition. When you respect your body, when you have a balanced lifestyle of diet and exercise and relaxation, when you have loving relationships, when you optimize your own potentials in many different ways, intellectually and in being aware of the world at large, and particularly of being compassionate. We live in a world where there's a lot of suffering, and often to protect ourselves from the pain of the world, we build a kind of shell around ourselves. We don't want to know certain things. We don't want to see certain things. And in that sense, we wall ourselves off from our compassion. And in so doing, we wall ourselves off from our own higher potentials as well, from our intuition. I think there are two kinds of skeptics. There are the skeptics on the left, the rationalist, materialist skeptics, and they say, oh, there's nothing to it. It's all subliminal computation, or it's flim-flam, or it's chicanery, or fraud, or careless thinking. On the one hand, that rationality is the highest human function, and that's that. And then you have the skeptics on the right, who basically are your fundamentalist religious types of people. And they say, well, intuition is you're not obeying the authority of the church, or intuition is the work of the devil. It exists, it's real, but it's evil in some sense, because it doesn't come under the kind of authority that we believe it should, the Bible or the Quran or the Torah or something of that sort. Intuitive people are generally the kind of people who make both the rationalists and the extreme traditionalists very nervous. Intuition is, you might say this, the rationalists, I think of them as people who are oriented very much to the present, to the here and now, to business, to science. The traditionalists are oriented towards the world of the past, and people who are intuitive are oriented towards the future. And it makes the skeptics of both of these camps nervous to think about the future, because they're not prepared for the future.
We're in such a mode of, I want facts, I want figures, I want paper, I want validation, I want authority. We look for validation from every space out there in the form of the written word of other people, and we're not trusting ourselves. That's the sad part.
We ignore it by and large because we're not listening and don't hear. Or we're afraid of it, we're not comfortable with it, it's just not part of our lifestyle.
I believe myself that skepticism is healthy. That means I like to trust my inner experience. However, if skepticism is a way of closing myself to new experience, then I find it unhealthy. So I try to maintain in myself a healthy skepticism. I am confident of what I'm telling you because I have been skeptical. I have applied what I'm telling you, and it works for me.
I don't think you can convince them. If they're willing to take the opportunity to try to experience their own intuition, they can come through their personal experience to know what intuition really is. Because I don't think they can be convinced. I don't think it's an argument.
If they don't feel it and they don't have it, don't go by it. You know, if I find somebody that really doesn't have the spirit or can't feel it, then I don't want them going by it. I don't want them trusting it. But those people that do, and there are more of them than you think there are, those people that do follow it, and I encourage them to do so.
Once you have the experience of something, you no longer need to believe in it. A believer is someone who would like to have an experience and wants that experience to happen and believes that it can happen but has not yet experienced it. Someone who has had an experience is no longer a believer in that experience. It moves into your inner domain. It reshapes who you are. Healthy skepticism can reshape who you are in that same way. I used to do experiments with my sister, for example. We decided we would see if we could know what each other was doing at a certain time of the day. So we would pick a time, and then at that time we would both stop whatever we were doing, think about the other, and then at the end of the day we'd compare notes. And almost always she saw me doing what I was doing, and I saw her doing what she was doing. After we did this several times, I didn't have to believe that I could do it. I knew that I could do it.
Carl Jung talked about modern man in search of the soul. We live in a culture that to a large degree is denying the soul. Although I have to say we've turned the corner. That culture is dying away right now. We're on the dawn of another age, and there are the traditionalists trying to hold everything back, but more and more people are moving into the future-oriented, forward-thinking camp.
One of the ways that we can work to reopen ourselves to our intuitive self is to become more spiritual in our orientation. So I think it's the developing our spiritual outlook and orientation is something that nurtures our intuitive self, nurtures our intuitive development, because the spiritual way is naturally an intuitive way.
I think a highly intuitive person is also highly disciplined. It's not just do your thing or do what feels right or feels good. It's go for the passion. Go for something you're willing to commit your life to. And that involves not only great joy, but it involves a very serious level of commitment. That to me is intuition. Otherwise, you become kind of a dilettante. You can be on the surface of life. And intuition is not just riding on the surface of life.